Hello and welcome to this latest episode of our Virtuosity webinar series. My name is Colin Bullen. I am the founder and director of Virtuosity. In today's webinar, we're continuing our focus on trust. This started early in September when my colleagues, Hanley van Beek and Gloria Gong, we got together and we did a webinar talking about trust in the team setting, and this created more reaction than any webinar we've run to date. So we've decided to dig a little deeper and invited a couple of guests to share their views and experiences on the subject. On 17th of November, Hanley had a conversation with longtime friend and collaborator Andrew Sykes, and a recording of that is on our website if you've not seen it already. Today, I am thrilled to be hosting John McGlinchey, as the CEO and founder of Beyond 100%. John is a seasoned sales professional with over 30 years of experience in across the globe, transforming teams and driving business growth. At his most recent role, he was the CRO of CompTIA. He tripled revenue there and launched many industry-leading programs. Today, through his company Beyond 100%, John helps businesses and individuals master the art of sales with his Salecraft methodology, which I'm hoping to learn a little bit about today. John tells me that one of the reasons for his success is he stays very cool under pressure. He once found himself in China with colleagues negotiating with a group of savvy businessmen. When they hit a stalemate over just a few dollars, they cranked up the AC to Arctic levels, trying to freeze them into submission. They just sat there, bundled up in anything they could find, refused to give in. And after hours of standing firm, they eventually sealed the deal, proving that in sales, sometimes you have to stay cool in every sense of the word. So, John, or should I say Mr. Cool, a very warm welcome to this webinar.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Colin. And as you talked about that day, I'm getting shivers thinking about it and thinking about well, it's something that'll stick with me. It's one of those stories that'll stick with me to the day I die. And even one of our board members had a scarf around his neck because it was wintertime anyway. Yeah. He took the scarf from around his neck and he put it around his ankles down below in his feet just to keep his ankles warm. So but yeah, it's an interesting story, and resilience is important in sales.
Absolutely. And now we get onto the subject of trust in sales, and trusting people to set the right temperature in the room is maybe one thing. Exactly. John, you want to start with a little background on yourself and maybe touch on why you think trust seems to be such an important subject right now?
Yeah, totally. And I've spent all my life, all my adult life and working life pretty much in sales, apart from the first couple of years or so. And I started in the streets, actually selling on the streets before financial regularity came in. We were trying to generate leads in the streets of Dublin and asking people for their details. So I've been in sales in a long time, and lots of ups and downs, traveled the world, been very fortunate, and led some great teams. Now I've started my own business and focusing on growing and helping sales leaders particularly and salespeople become more successful, helping them achieve what they can achieve, and using all the skills and knowledge and stories I've had over the years in China or wherever to help people get a real feel for what works in sales and what's important.
Great stuff. So what's happening with trust at the moment? Is it declining? My sense is that from what I'm reading that businesses are losing trust. I know from a sales perspective, that's always been an important element of achieving a successful sales environment. Do you see it as declining, or is there something else going on?
It's becoming more important. I don't see it declining in what I'm experiencing for sure. I think trust is very closely linked to authenticity as well, and be your true self. And trust isn't just one thing in my eyes. And I know you, in your framework, you talk about reliability, competence, and sincerity. In sales, it's similar, but a slightly different framework. And it's about your competence. Do you have all the skills required? Are you showing up consistently, both to your meetings and online? And I think that authenticity is hugely important. Are you being your true self? And that might take some work because people pitch up in the sales environment and they try to be this flash salesperson trying to do all these wonderful things. And just be yourself, because ultimately that's what your buyer wants, to understand you truly. And then reliability, to show that that person can count on you. And that's hugely important, that when you say, Mr. Customer, Mrs. Customer, this is what I'm going to do for you, that you follow up and you're reliable and you deliver on what you're going to say you delivered. I think honestly that trust is the true currency of sales. It really is. Without trust, that foundational, and it's up to the salesperson, sales leaders, to build that bridge of trust with the customer and with the prospects.
I mean,
so it's key.
Yeah, I mean, the hard part with sales surely is the fact that you've got, well, potentially so little time. I mean, there's the if you are reliable, if you are competent in what you do, and you are sincere and authentic, and you are being yourself, then you will over time undoubtedly demonstrate that you are trustworthy to the customer. But in sales, sometimes you've got some fairly short periods in order to create an impression. Is that something you pick up on in your training? That's, it's a different world for sales.
Totally. And those first couple of seconds, quite literally, and we've all heard, you're so right, Colin, we've all heard those first 3 seconds are vitally important, and they are. Think about yourself in your world, and when you meet somebody for the first time, and whether it's in a sales environment or just socially, or out for a pub for a drink and you meet friends and there's somebody new in the group, you immediately say, oh, that person's I can get on with that person, or they're something else. So, and the same is true in the business world, because people are people regardless of where they are, whether they're in the pub meeting you or whether they're behind the desk. And that's why first impressions are so vitally important. You've got to set the tone for the rest of the meeting. And you only have literally those first few seconds when you're standing there face to face, or if it's a virtual call. And buyers will decide very early on whether they see value in continuing that conversation with you. And it all hinges on how you do in those first couple of seconds, those first couple of minutes particularly. And how trustworthy are you? That's the first thing. Do I trust this? Before you get to pitch and products and what he does, what you do, that first minute, how trustworthy is this salesperson?
I mean, is that something you pick up in salescraft, and if so, what do you say to these people who are meeting, many people for the first time, almost relentlessly as part of the job? What do you do in the first minute? Say 3 seconds, 5 seconds, minute probably is as much time as it probably takes for them to get a pretty good idea of who they're dealing with.
Yeah, you've got to meet them where they are. In my eyes, you've got to find something that resonates strongly with them, that you can talk to them about. You got to find something, and whether you meet them in the reception area or whether you're sitting like we are now and at their desk and you're doing a virtual call, you see perhaps a piece of golf memorabilia behind, like I have here. So you strike up a conversation. John, you're a golfer, you play golf, and you get to build a rapport. Or it's sport, it's basketball, or perhaps it's a prize for debating, or it's a business award if you're in the reception of a company, and the person's meeting you and there's awards in the reception area. Fantastic company. Or if it's the car park and you're looking to see lovely big BMWs, Porsche, McLarens in the car park. Maybe one of those cars is his. So you try to find something to build that rapport, to build that interaction, so that you've got something to talk about. So it's important and then that conversation from, if you meet somebody in the reception area of a building, to their office or to the meeting room, those minutes are vitally important, because you get to know them outside the business that you're doing. Yeah. And you get to know them personally. So those first couple of minutes, building those relationships, making the impression, building trust, building rapport, all of that kind of has to happen simultaneously in the first couple of minutes, which
it's a lot, isn't it?
That's a lot, and that's where it's all made. And the biggest problem is trying to force it, and if you're not your true authentic self, it comes across as if it's fabricated, you're not genuine. And that's worse than having no conversation almost, you know?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm hearing that the word that's coming through for me from what you're saying is connection. That you're trying to build a connection through common themes, commonality with that person, and with the connection, then you can start building a relationship. But until you've got that connection, until there's something that you can leverage, but it's got to come. And you've made the point so many times, and I'm going to make it again, about being authentic. It's got to be you that's connecting with that person, because if it's not, you're going to be found out. You're probably going to be found out before the end of that first meeting. It's you've got to put yourself out there. Is there therefore body language that you should be using to help create that connection, openness, yeah, that kind of thing?
Yes, it's all of that stuff. And it's pretty much, and what one of the things that I have been good at in my career, if you know, I look at myself, and if I'm meeting somebody, like we're having this conversation, if we met at a reception area or at a call, I would try to elevate myself up above the conversation, and as if I was looking down at the conversation, looking at, you're right, the body language. How are both of these people looking? Looking at it from outside, although you're part of the conversation, and trying to, well, how is a customer being accepting? Am I saying the right things? You almost have to be on supercharge in those first couple of minutes, and trying to look at it as a third person almost. How am I behaving? You know, am I? You sometimes got to mirror what you're seeing across from you in order to like that person, for that person to like you, because that's what has to happen in the first couple of minutes. That connection you mentioned has to happen, and it's almost being able to see the conversation from outside the conversation, to adjust, to understand how is the prospect or the customer at the other side, how are they behaving? Are they being a bit standoffish? Is there something wrong here? You got to be really switched on. Emotional intelligence comes into this really early on as well, you know, hugely important piece of being a salesperson, because you got to focus. If you're not authentic yourself and being able to connect, it doesn't matter about your pitch, you know, further down. And the biggest problem salespeople is they try to make the pitch way too early. They're trying to make the pitch when they meet that person first time, which you should focus on your own authenticity initially rather than the pitch. And that will build the connection, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So it's stay away from the pitch, and then build trust from the you got the first impression, but then you've got a long duration, hopefully, of relationship where you can take it beyond the first impression into something more, and then build trust over time, and that for me means, you know, remembering details about the individual. You talked about this, you know, this. Oh, I've talked about connection and all that in. You know, this knowing something about them, but then able to go back and say, oh, you know, John talked about the kids, talk about the golf, whatever it is that. So it's not just lost, and that's of course the art of listening. You know, if you're going to be successful and trustworthy, you've got to be able to listen to what that person's saying and take it on board. Has the virtual world change that much? It's still the same principles, isn't it?
It's exactly the same principles, but it has changed. And I think for the better as well. You know, if you look at before COVID, you know, if COVID has been responsible for so much in our lives over the last whatever number of years. And I think that forced salespeople to try to be more authentic on the phone, particularly. And it's more challenging to build those connections virtually on a call, on a Zoom call, or on a platform where you're meeting customers. So you have to rely more heavily on being transparent, on being clear in your communication, on being empathetic. It's almost like everything is exaggerated to try to get your point across, because it's so much more difficult. So I think that it's forced people to be more authentic. And it requires a conscious, if you're remote and trying to build that, it requires a conscious effort to make that human connection. It's so easy to switch off. You know, I've even found myself more recently on a call. I happen to be on mostly camera calls like this, but then occasionally there's no camera. And I find myself switching off during that call. You know, I find myself wandering off because nobody was watching me, and I think that's the pre-COVID situation. You know, pre-COVID, we were all these conference calls. Nobody was really listening because nobody did really, you know. So it forces you to listen a little bit more, and
we're
you
more
don't have
deliberate.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So I think it's the virtual stuff has really forced us to be more connected, more present. You know, that's what we're talking about. And I have a big problem personally being present in many conversations, and you know, and trying to stay, because when I was in my previous role as chief revenue officer, I had many things running around in my head. I have anyway. Normally, my mind goes. So with that job, there was a lot of stuff going on. So I'd be sitting talking to maybe one of the team or my boss or somebody else in the organization. I wasn't thinking about that conversation. I was thinking about, I must do this, I must do that, I have to do
And
such and such.
you're thinking nobody's noticing, but they are.
Yeah, you've got that vacant stare in your eyes, because I've had those conversations with people. I go, you're not listening to me, really. I know you're not even here. You're somewhere else. So that was me, you know, and it's so embarrassing now when I look back, is I wasn't present. And that's super important as a salesperson, super important.
Yeah. So here we are. We're preaching about the benefits of trust and so on. And I'm an actuary who's built a business on the back of demonstrating that the value of the outcomes that we create from the training that we run. How would you go about measuring trust in the impact of trust, should I say, in sales performance? Have you done anything to evaluate how it actually manifests itself and what happens when trust is prioritized?
Yeah, I think it's, you know, we have a lot of data floating around and a lot of measurement and details on customers and all sorts of conversion rates and all sorts of stuff going on, you know, but looking at a salesperson and understanding if they lack trust, or if the prospects don't see trust or don't trust that person, is relatively easy to measure, because you'll get a really good feel from it early on. There's a couple of key points. What'll happen over time: deal velocity, the number of deals that are actually coming in for that salesperson. If they're genuine and authentic and they're being sincere with the customers, building that trust, you'll see more deals coming in over time. If they start with you over a period, it'll grow. If that doesn't happen, there's obviously an issue. And then when you get to the conversion rates, a customer will not sign a deal with you almost all of the time if they don't trust you.
Yeah.
You know, so if your conversion rates are low, it could be a trust issue. Customer loyalty: if a customer buys once and then doesn't buy again, is it a trust issue? So you've got to look at perhaps those three things and understand, okay, where are the issues? Because if a salesperson can build trust effectively, knowledgeable about their products, all the other stuff will come along, but the trust is the key. So you'll notice the deal velocity, conversion rates, customer loyalty. When trust is prioritized, we consistently see increased deal size, reduced on customer churn, which is, you know, vitally important. It's really difficult to get new customers, but to maintain your existing ones is a lot easier. And you'll get referral business if trust, you know, really important, being referred to somebody else. So it's easier to spot maybe perhaps than some of the other things, but fixing it.
I'm just thinking that you know, you're kind of blessed almost, and it's a curse for the salesperson. But you know, there's a lot of data, as you say, floating around the sales process. So using that to diagnose trust issues, concerns, and then help them and support them to understand how they can present to be more trustworthy in front of the customers is yeah, that sounds like you're blessed with much more data than normally I'd get to try to
evaluate. And I think even, you know, that visit by the sales leader with the salesperson to a customer, you'll immediately identify where are the gaps. You know, when you're right there on the call or sitting in on a call, you'll see and be able to help that salesperson. And hopefully you do that early on in their career and help them change and be more successful, for sure.
You're touching on kind of moving into a coaching type situation there, where you're, you know, supporting someone perhaps relatively senior to be more effective at closing that. So, I mean, how trust for me, it's got to play an important role in any kind of coaching relationship as well. I mean, never mind the trust that the salesperson's trying to create. If you're trying to coach somebody, presumably you're looking to build trust fairly early on to get them to hear the things that you're saying.
Yeah, totally. And again, that connection, again, that trust will come around if going back to the very, where we started the conversation on the coaching environment, if you're consistent, if you're being authentic, if you're being reliable, you show up when you're supposed to show up.
Yeah.
Are you a good coach? Are you competent? Are you able to help this individual? So yes, from a sales leader's perspective, trust is vitally important to be able to coach. And for a coach to be able to coach somebody, they've got to be coachable. That's the big thing as well. And generally, I find that people are generally coachable if they're trying to be authentic, if they're trying to be real, if they're trying to help themselves and to be more consistent, to be more authentic. So I think it's a two-way thing on the coaching stuff. The coach has got to be, the coachee's got to trust the coach 100% that they're competent, that they're reliable, they've been there, done that, they're able to help, but also it's a two-way street, from both.
Yeah, absolutely. It's got to be reflected on both sides. You've got to trust that the recipient is going to hear what you're going to say, and it's all going to be worthwhile.
Yeah. Yes. Trust is a key in so many, even our personal relationships, if you think about, come back to when you were dating, it's probably pretty much the same game, or you're right, or hopefully somebody trusts you. It's the same scenario, right?
Yeah, but that also touches on a point which we haven't really picked on. It's probably a whole nother conversation, is that trust applies in, certain situations. So, I trust my partner completely, but would I trust her to sit here and replace me in this conversation or do actuarial calculations? No, I wouldn't. So I think when we talk about trust, it's important to notice that there is an element of context involved when you talk about it. So for the sales conversation, it's clear. It's the conversation between somebody who's trying to position a product to make it interesting for somebody and building a relationship, and somebody who's potentially a purchaser of that thing. And that's quite a sort of a linear trust situation. But yeah, we just need the language needs to be kept in check, say, just because of the context. You've kind of touched on this already, but I'd like to just try and wrap it up in a sort of a little package. The skills and behaviors that you would teach salespeople as part of the process that you take them through, other specific skills and behaviors that you would focus on, so that individual that bubbles up through the data or to be struggling, what would you sit down and talk to them about specifically?
Yeah, and there are some obviously key skills that you have to have as a salesperson. And when I was growing up in the part of the world that I grew up in was Ireland, right? So, and they would say, "Oh, John, you've got a gift of the gab, and you'd be a great salesperson." That's actually the worst thing a salesperson could actually have. A person that the gift of the gab, to let my American friends know, is all about you can talk and you talk too much, probably.
Yep.
So you've got two of these. I always, it's an old cliche. You got two of these and one of those. Right. Use these more important. Active listening.
Yeah.
Listening is super important. Building trust, closing deals, trying to understand the issues, the challenges that your customer is facing. If you're not listening, and that goes back to my comment earlier about the pitch, rushing to get to the pitch. Yeah. You've got to listen to the customer, understand where are their challenges. Do they have any challenges? Is there something I can help them with? And if you're talking too much, you'll never get to the challenges, and you'll sell products perhaps and transactional, but you'll never build that solution, that you'll never be ingrained into the organization and be a key partner that's adding value if you don't have that active listening. And I mentioned it earlier, authentic communication, being able to see, regardless if and there's a lot of smooth speakers and I've worked with a lot of really slick salespeople. You don't have to be that slick. Just be authentic, mm-hmm. and communicate and you'll be just as successful. And consistently following through. I talk about that all the time. Show up consistently, and emotional intelligence. You've got to manage your own emotional intelligence, and you've got to try to manage the buyer's emotional intelligence as well. It's like driving in the car, you know, you're looking out for yourself, but you're also looking out for other drivers, making sure you're not going to get bumped into. And it's the same thing for a salesperson, you know, you're managing that whole ecosystem.
Yeah.
So those four for me are particularly important. And there's many more, I'm sure, that would come up.
Yeah, look, I'd have put listening at the top of the list as well. The ability to take what you hear from the customer and just change your pitch, change your language, change what you be that partner for the customer rather than, oh, I've got product X that I'm trying to plug in here. And if there's only space for product Y or something different, trying to plug X in is just going to rub you both up the wrong way, and your chances are going to get blown of building something together. So, yeah, listening and changing what you do as a consequence of hearing that from the customer is got to be crucial. This is a difficult question. If there was one thing, people who are listening to this and trying to pick up a few tidbits of what's the right way to go, and they're sitting perhaps in an environment with less trust than they would like. They'd like to create in our world, it's build a team dynamic that's got greater trust, there's more trustworthiness in the individuals in the team. What would you pull out first out of the bag? Is it listening or is it something else?
You've got to be true to yourself, because you got to live. Once you're sitting at home or you're playing your golf or watching the football or having a beer or whatever you're doing, you've got to be able to listen to yourself and know that, I was true to myself. I was authentic. I was me. So I would say to every salesperson, regardless, or sales leader, be you, be authentic. Don't try to be something you're not. And if you're in an environment where you're being unsuccessful being you, then you need help. Or you need to change careers, perhaps. I don't know, but be you. It'll
trust
be
yourself.
more.
Trust yourself. Go with it.
Yeah, because you're going to be happier in your life. If you're trying to be something else, you're never going to be happy. And that's the key important thing, And if you're not happy and being your true, authentic self, you're never going to build trust. You're never going to trust yourself to start with, and that's you're not trusting yourself, so you can't build trust with others. That's my key thing I would say to everybody.
Thank you, John. We've got to the end of our time. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining the webinar and for sharing all your valuable insights and wisdom. John, if people want to get hold of you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, you can connect with me on LinkedIn or John at beyond100%.com. I'll get your email. Happy to respond. Love to get your feedback and hear from you.
Okay, fantastic. We'll get that put onto the screen as well. So just from our side, Virtuosity Team offers a range of online and face-to-face courses to help build exceptional teams, and that's accessible through our website, virtuositeam.com. You can contact us at hello@virtuositeam.com to learn more about building trust in teams and open cultures. That is all today. Keep an eye out for future webinars in the Virtuosity Team series. Until then, from John and I, goodbye.
Thank you.